Ever get a late night phone call from a girl crying, and my son, who was a sophomore, only child at University of Colorado, was his girlfriend called and she was crying, and my only words to her were, "Kaylee, is he alive?" And she said no. And at that moment I realized this is something that you just can't plan for. You dive into a depth that is unimaginable. Anyway, my wife heard what was going on. She fell out of the car. We had just been out to dinner, and we cried on the roadway for 2 hours. Make a long story short, I'm here now not because I want to be. I don't want to be here. I don't want to be an opioid expert. I don't want people to say you're strong. I'm not. I'm weak. I don't have answers. But what we're doing here is trying to save one life. I think we're saving literally thousands, but one is enough. All right, I don't want to waste any more of your time because she's on a very, very tight schedule. She is amazingly busy. I want to introduce to you right now a good friend of mine. By the way, President Donald Trump tweeted about this appearance just a little while ago. A very good friend of mine, the First Lady of the United States of America, Mrs. Trump, Melania Trump. Welcome, everybody. So I'd like to start with, I just moved to South Carolina. And I called my wife. I said, what should I call the First Lady? We've known each other for many, many years, 11, 12 years. And Melania, I've seen your, So she's like, maybe Mrs. Trump. And I said, well, in South Carolina, they say Lady A. My wife's name is Adrian, Lady A. May I call you Lady M?
Yes, of course.
Lady M. So listen, I heard you, and I've heard you going around the country. By the way, thank you so much. Everyone, thank her for what she's doing in the opioid crisis epidemic. Thank you. You mentioned the media. Will you please expand on how you think the media is treating this, the epidemic, and treating those of us who are trying to fight the opioid epidemic?
Well, I wish the media would talk about more and educate more children, also adults, parents, about the opioid crisis that we have in the United States. They do it already, but I think not enough.
Do you think are they partisan? Obviously, the husband is very involved in the opioid. Can I tell us a quick story, guys? My son passed away at 10:30 at night one night. The president and the First Lady called me the next morning. I was in Colorado. He was going to University of Colorado. And they called and they said, can I do anything? We were in such a funk, I didn't know where up or down was. But what really struck me was about 5 or 6 weeks later, it was Thanksgiving, and we had that proverbial empty chair for Thanksgiving dinner. And I know it's about to be really, really bad. I walk towards the table. This is honest to God, true story. As I approach the table, everyone's already seated. I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to help my wife a little bit. The phone rings again, and it was President Trump and the First Lady saying, we know how hard this day is for you. We just want you to know we're thinking about you. There's the compassion of the First family. Thank you. But what else can the media do? How can they help us in our fight and help you in your fight, especially with the Be Best initiatives?
Well, just for example, we are here today talking about it. I think it should be on every media, on the front pages of the newspaper, and I'm sure a lot of people would follow and go home and talk with the children, educate them so they are responsible adults, and they show them how drugs can be dangerous.
Do you have that conversation with Barron?
I do, yes. I teach him, I try to explain how drugs are dangerous, and it will mess up your head, it will mess up your body, and nothing comes positive out of it.
So we were in Asheville. You had joined us at Liberty University in Lynchburg, Virginia. We then went to Asheville, North Carolina, and we got a phone call after the Asheville show. And it was a lady who had said, I had watched the First Lady at Liberty University. It was amazing. I was stunned. I followed it, and she watched the Asheville show as well. She called the news director afterwards saying, "You saved my life," to the news director. And he said, "Why?" "Well, I watched the First Lady in Lynchburg. I got involved. I'm a 5-year heroin user. I'm addicted, but I turned my life around. I'm off." She quit right there. So your reach is amazing. It's amazing.
That's why we are here. So many people, we could save lives.
Yeah. Another lady called and said, "I had the discussion with my 11-year-old daughter." And she said that she wasn't sure that an 11-year-old would understand what was going on. And to her surprise, the 11-year-old daughter said, "Oh yeah, Mom, someone had brought some of that to school once." 11. So what age is the age that parents should start talking to their children about drugs?
I think 8. I don't think, because nowadays the children are so smart, and they're so the life is such fast life, and they have access to everything, the media, the technology, so they are aware of it, and we need to teach them in early age how dangerous drugs are.
Where do you think, so we have, there's law enforcement side of it, cracking down on dealers, making sure drugs aren't coming into the country, but there's also the awareness side of it. Where do you think we are? Which is stronger in America right now, our law enforcement side or the awareness side? Where do we need the most help?
Well, law enforcement, they're doing an amazing job, and we should applaud them for everything what they do. But we need to make sure that no drugs are coming to our country. We know they're coming through southern border, but also they're coming from China, and it's very dangerous. And we need to stop that. We need to really work hard to stop that.
So I was, please. I was at a bill signing. And Lady M, you made some eloquent remarks, and the president made some eloquent remarks, and then we signed into law, the American people signed into law $6 billion to fight the opioid crisis for this year and next year. Where is that money best directed?
I would say just for people to helping, and to have many facilities that whoever have an addiction, we could save people's lives.
You spend a lot of time in hospitals. Tell us about that. What do you see with these, not only neonatal, but also children who are addicted, adults who are addicted? What are you seeing in the hospitals?
I met a lot of young mothers who had babies, and babies are born with neonatal absence syndrome. It's very hard to see, and they need help. When they come out of the hospital, they need help. We need to establish more programs for young mothers. And I meet a lot of families who have a problem.
Tell us about it, holding a baby that's addicted to an opioid. What does that feel like? What does that look like? What is that experience like?
It's very touching. It's in one way it's very sad, but I have a hope because we have a lot of great professionals who they know what they're doing, and they're saving those babies, and those babies slowly transition to a healthy lifestyle.
And they're shaking sometimes, or they're
shaking. They cannot sleep. They have nausea. They don't eat properly. And it takes time before they go off the drugs. It's like it's a slow process.
In your home country, is there a drug problem the way it is here?
It's not the way it is here. Of course, every country has a drug problem. But it's not the way it is here. It always was a problem, but they're doing the best that they can to prevent the young children to go in the wrong path.
Are they doing something differently than we are?
I think the stigma needs to be addressed, and we need to talk about it, and whoever has a problem should not be ashamed to come forward to ask for help.
Yeah. One of the things we've learned, folks, is that as we go around the country, and again, Sinclair's been great, we're doing 14 of these, I think that's the thing that we've realized the most. The best tool to fight the opioid crisis is removing the stigma, and what we mean is, if you're a young person who's worried about about getting thrown off a football team, or getting, suspended from school, or in trouble with your parents, or someone who's in the workforce worrying about getting fired, or someone worrying about being arrested if they show up at a first responder with drugs on them trying to help a friend, that's got to go away. Most states are passing what's called Good Samaritan laws, which allow you, if your friend is having a problem, overdosing, to bring the friend in and no questions asked, they will be taken care of. Do we need more of that?
We need more of that. I visited the rescue in New Hampshire last year, and they're doing a fantastic job, and they're saving many lives, and we need more of that. We need that in every town, really.
Okay, so now, and we did this at Liberty too, we transitioned to have a little bit of fun. We're allowed to do that. Lady M, tell us a little bit about what you do. Give us a typical day in the White House. What does Lady M do for when she gets up, has a little coffee perhaps, and then?
My days are very busy. I wake up very early. I make sure my son goes off to school, and then I start working. I'm having a team in my East office, East Wing, of 12. We're working very hard, working with them very closely and very detail-oriented. And then I have 100 people looking over in the residence, and also working very closely with White House Historical Association, making sure the White House is in beautiful, perfect shape.
The last time we were here, we talked about the red Christmas trees. You remember what happened after?
I remember.
It went everywhere. Everyone loved the red Christmas trees. The media was calling her out for it, but boy, they were phenomenal. Guess what? I think you started a red Christmas tree phenomenon in America. Okay, so here, I asked you this question before. I'm going to ask it again. 20, 30 chefs in the White House, I guess, make sure they can cook anything. Lady M, do you ever say, all right, you guys got the night off, and you get behind there, and what would you cook for you and the president if you had that, if you had everything that you're exposed to everything, any type of food, what do you cook?
I didn't do that yet, honestly. There are always a little snacks that I could prepare for our son, and when he comes home late. But no, it's really no time. And they're doing in the White House, they're doing such a fantastic job that they're a real professional. So I want to keep them.
All right, one more question. If the family had one choice for a meal as a group, what would it be? Casserole? McDonald's? Someone said McDonald's.
Maybe spaghetti.
There we go. All right. What I want to do now is we ask social media for some questions. And the reason why I'm doing this is the New York Times had heard that we were going to ask questions of the First Lady, and they called me. They said, are you really going to do that, or are you going to make these up? And I swear to you, I didn't make these up. These are legitimate social media questions from both Facebook and Twitter and commentary. I asked you that one by accident. How is your birth country? We went over that one. What is your goal, and how do you plan to achieve it? By the way, it's a wonderful thing she's doing. What's your goal of this?
Of my Be Best initiative? Yeah. I'm very proud what we achieved so far. It's almost a year-old initiative. It has 3 pillars: well-being of children, use of social media, and opioid crisis. I just visited yesterday Microsoft. They show me how children can be safe on the internet and websites and Xboxes and all the games. And I'm very proud what we achieved so far. I want to shine a light on the successful programs and give them the voice and support them and partner with them. So people across the country and around the world, they will have more knowledge, and we educate them.
Very good. Couple of quick comments. They want us to wrap because we have the First Lady has a very tight schedule. Very quickly, taking from screen grab, my 5-year-old granddaughter woke up after getting dressed and said, I think I look like that beautiful lady in the White House. Please keep fighting the fight for the children of America. And we want to know something? They're right. Our children deserve us to fight for them. First Lady Melania Trump. One quick question before we go. I'm sorry, producers. One quick question. There's a bowling alley in the basement of the White House. Ever go bowling?
I just renovated it. It looks beautiful. It really looks beautiful, yes. And we have fun sometimes, and I'm looking forward to using it more now that it's right there close to our house.
Who doesn't want a bowl in the White House? I know I do. I know I do. Everybody, ladies and gentlemen, the First Lady of the United States, Melania Trump, Lady M to me, if that's okay.
Thank you very much.
We'll be right back.
Nick was very smart, very studious. Jack was very adventurous. He was more the daredevil, so to speak, with stuff, very athletic.
June 14th is the day Becky Savage lost 2 of her sons.
They both had hearts of gold.
It was the day after a graduation party. Nick brought some friends for a sleepover. And the next morning, Becky went into Jack's bedroom to get his laundry.
And he was unresponsive, and that's kind of when our nightmare started.
Both boys died of an overdose of oxycodone and alcohol. One bad choice cost them their lives, and it could have been prevented.
My reaction was just disbelief. I kept thinking, why wouldn't they just say no?
Becky talked to her boys about alcohol and drugs, but she never mentioned the dangers of powerful prescription pills like opioids.
Prescription drug misuse and abuse was not something that was on our radar at that point.
They were hockey players.
Now Becky talks about it with whoever listens, with high schoolers, hundreds of them at a time.
And the common theme of questions that they ask me are, well, they're prescribed by a physician. My doctor prescribed it, or it was prescribed by a doctor. Why are you saying it's not safe? When it was prescribed for somebody else, it's not safe to take.
It's all about choices.
Daniel Neal begs students not to start, not to experiment. He's the special agent in charge of the Drug Enforcement Administration in Las Vegas.
Just have the conversation. Have the conversation and talk about it.
Talking about it keeps Nick and Jack's stories alive. Talking about it may keep other people's children alive.
You know, we can use Nick and Jack's story to help change the course of somebody else's life.
The United States is by far the largest consumer of opioids, using more pills per person than any other country in the world. In fact, overdose deaths have quadrupled since 1999 and now account for the majority of fatal drug overdoses. These overdoses are being driven by a huge increase in addiction to prescription painkillers, heroin, and now fentanyl. No part of our society or our country has been spared for the deadly disease or drug addiction. As most of you here know, my husband and his entire administration are committed to fighting the nation's opioid epidemic. As the statistics very clearly demonstrate, it is the worst drug crisis in American history, and as such, the President declared it a public health emergency and directed all executive agencies to use every appropriate emergency authority to fight this crisis. I have been honored to work alongside many of those agencies, including the Department of Health and Human Services, the Department of Homeland Security, the Office of National Drug Control Policy, and now joining us later today, the United States Drug Enforcement Agency. Together and with all of you here today, I know we can make a real difference and save lives. I do believe we can be known as the generation that ended the opioid epidemic.
All right, welcome back. That was the First Lady of the United States, everybody. Fantastic. Awesome, awesome. I want to also, again, let's thank Westgate Resorts and also News 3 for making sure that this is working out great. I'd like to now introduce a member of the DEA, not only a member of the DEA, the acting administrator of the DEA, Adam Dillon. Thank you so much for joining us, sir.
Well, thank you for having me.
So, I think you, I guess, would be on the forefront, the front lines of the opioid fight, drugs in general, but the opioid fight as well. You know, we keep seeing these fentanyl busts. Sometimes they'll have a suitcase of fentanyl and it'll be enough to kill, I don't know, 1 million people. And you're cracking down on these. How are we winning the fight against opioid epidemic deaths and addiction?
Well, winning is something I'm not willing to say at this point. I will tell you that we are seeing a flattening of drug overdose deaths. So we're pleased with that. We are seizing more. We are seizing more fentanyl than we seized last year. This year we've seized 700 more kilograms of fentanyl than last year. We are putting more fentanyl dealers in jail than we have in the past. So we're making progress, but we have a long way to go.
Okay, so you're saying, what is it? What is the major reason you're seeing what you call a flattening? In other words, if you're watching a chart every year, deaths have gotten worse, but you're saying it's leveling out. What do you attribute that to?
Well, we're doing a lot to attack the opioid crisis in this country. We're increasing the number of special agents. We're putting 350 agents through the academy this year. So when I took over 8 months ago, we were 670 DEA agents down. So that's a real problem. We're adding agents. We're adding task force officers, up to 400 task force officers. Those are state and local task force officers, or state and local law enforcement officers who work with DEA. We're adding prosecutors. The Department of Justice is adding hundreds of prosecutors throughout the country. So we're beefing up enforcement. We're beefing up prosecutions, and that's going to have an impact.
A couple of questions. How can we do better? Let me ask you that. I mean, clearly more officers. Do you think that that's the only way to tackle the crisis is through the enforcement side and basically getting the drugs off the street?
So this administration has a three-pronged approach: prevention, treatment, and enforcement. DEA is primarily enforcement, but as you know, the president signed a bill last year authorizing $6 billion to be spent on prevention and treatment. So you've got to fight the prevention side, you've got to focus on treatment, but enforcement is critical. The last few years, enforcement hasn't been emphasized. When President Trump became president, he started to emphasize enforcement. So that's what we're doing. We're increasing enforcement, and you've got to restrict supply. One of the reasons we're seeing the crisis we're seeing today is because supply went up. There was simply more prescription opioids and other opioids available for people. The more supply there is, the more people tend to use it.
Is there a bigger problem with the prescription opioids than the illegal opioids coming through the border?
They're both problems, and DEA is attacking both of those. So DEA has a regulatory function also. We regulate the doctors, the pharmacists, those sorts of folks who have the ability to dispense these kinds of prescription drugs. They're called registrants. And we also set the limits to the amount of these drugs that can be manufactured each year.
Tell us how that's changed.
So what we've done is in the last 3 or 4 years, we've reduced the amount of opioids that can be manufactured by 47%. What that means is that those drugs are not available for diversion, that people can't get those drugs illegally and become addicted. But we still ensure that there are enough drugs for doctors to prescribe, for research and the like. So that's one of the ways we're attacking the problem.
So when we started this, well, actually prior to starting this, when my son passed, I started looking into it. Purdue Pharmaceutical produces OxyContin. I was blown away to find out that Purdue Pharmaceutical actually had sales meetings on how to sell more OxyContin into doctors. And of course, when a doctor gets more product, what's he going to do? He's going to prescribe more. Now, tell us where we stand with Purdue Pharmaceutical. There's some breaking news the last couple of days that they may be filing for bankruptcy.
Well, I'm not going to comment on any specific company since they are regulated by DEA, but I think it's important to recognize that we've been working with HHS to educate doctors about their prescription practices. The president said last year he wanted prescriptions for opioids to decrease by 30%. By working with doctors and educating them, so far we've seen a reduction in prescriptions over the last 2 years of 21% for opioids. So we're hoping to hit the president's 30% mark.
Are they just prescribing less pain relief, or are they turning to something else?
I think they're just being smarter about it. And remember, the manufacturers told doctors that opioids weren't addictive and they could prescribe a lot of them. That's what got us into a lot of the problem we're in now. People were simply...
Well, OxyContin trained their sales force, Purdue, I'm sorry. Maybe the whole industry trained their sales force to say that opioids weren't addictive and they were highly addictive. Anyone going to jail for that?
Again, I'm going to leave that to the Department of Justice to make those decisions.
Very good. Fentanyl, it's lethal, it's dangerous, right? Why is it legal?
Well, fentanyl is a Schedule II controlled substance because it's needed. It was developed to help people who had serious pain problems. So fentanyl is an important part of every doctor's regimen if you have a patient who has serious pain problems. Only recently people have started, using it in this illegal way because it's so powerful. It's a synthetic opioid that can be manufactured very easily and much more cheaply than heroin, for example. And that's unfortunately why it's become so popular.
It's multiples stronger than morphine.
It's 100 times stronger than morphine, and which is one of the reasons why we're seeing the overdose deaths we're seeing. It's very difficult for somebody who's not an expert. Remember, drug traffickers are not experts at drugs. They're manufacturing counterfeit pills, and they're adding fentanyl to those pills so that they can mimic real medications. If they add just a tiny bit too much fentanyl to a pill, you could die of an overdose.
My son passed away from a Xanax that was laced with fentanyl, and it was enough. And by the way, an admiral in the Navy lost his son the same night that my son passed away, also in the Denver area. I'm wondering if it was the same dealer. Is kratom? Do you know what kratom is?
I do.
Where do we stand on the kratom? The reason why I ask these questions is because every time I do one of these town halls, I get people saying, "Hey, wait a minute, you're taking away my pain management." I just think back. I've had a neck and a back surgery. I'm missing 4 discs in my spine, and I never once took an opioid. I think coming out of surgery, they gave me strong Advil or something. And all of a sudden now we need a drug, fentanyl, that can put down an elephant for some reason. I'm not sure. But now they say there's this new organic answer to opioids. Tell me about kratom.
Well, it is an organic product. The HHS and the FDA are examining kratom to determine what its properties are, whether or not it is an opioid, and whether it should be a controlled substance. And that's where we stand right now with kratom.
Which would mean you would have to enforce the distribution and the transport of kratom.
If they conclude that it's a controlled substance, then we would have to determine
do you have an opinion, or you shouldn't?
I'm going to wait for the scientific research. We base all of our decisions on science.
Okay, last question. The wall. Will a wall built on our southern border stop some of the flow of opioids coming across into the country, specifically from China and Korea?
Well, that's really DHS to decide. They're the experts on the border. But I will say this. I was just in the Yuma sector a few weeks ago visiting with the Border Patrol there. And what I learned is that drugs do cross between ports of entry. And in fact, many of the places where they cross, there's virtually no wall, no barrier at all. So it's important to realize that these drug trafficking organizations, these Mexican drug trafficking organizations, which present the greatest criminal threat to the United States, are more than capable of transporting drugs between the ports of entry. In fact, about 60% of all marijuana that comes into this country from Mexico comes between the ports of entry. So from
we don't hear that in the media. We hear most of the drugs that are coming into the country are coming through the ports of entry, therefore we don't need a wall.
Look, drug trafficking organizations are very clever. They have billions and billions of dollars. If you blocked every port of entry, I promise you they have ways to bring drugs between the ports of entry. And if you've ever visited the southwest border, the most amazing thing is once you get a few miles away from a port of entry, there's virtually no wall, no barrier, nothing. It's very easy to literally walk across the border. From DEA's perspective, every barrier we can put up along the southwest border where most drugs come from will stop drug traffickers or slow drug traffickers down, and that's important.
We were in Laredo, Texas. I could see a legal crossing there. I could see one there. They're less than a mile apart, and I could walk across the Rio Grande, and no one would ever see me. It was never deeper than my knee. I agree with you 100%. So before I let you go, there's this. I hear don't know. I hear there's a new form of fentanyl now, because if you don't, fentanyl is a very dangerous drug, but there's a drug called Narcan, the brand is Narcan, that can reverse an overdose as it's happening. I've seen this on video where someone could be overdosing, literally almost dying. They're administered a couple of shots of Narcan and they're alert and awake again. Is there a new fentanyl that's like a super fentanyl that's immune to the Narcan drug?
I don't know if it's immune. There's carfentanil, which is 100 times more powerful than fentanyl.
100 times more?
More powerful than fentanyl.
So is that 10,000 times more powerful than morphine?
Something like that. And so, I mean, the tiniest grain of it can kill you. It's not even created for human consumption. It's an elephant tranquilizer.
So what exactly, who makes that and where is that?
Well, that is legitimately made. It's a scheduled drug, and veterinarians use it.
What in the world do we need a drug that's 10,000 times stronger than morphine for?
Well, veterinarians need that to anesthetize large animals. The problem is people then learn to
people are using drugs that are used to anesthetize.
That's right. It is not for human consumption. The smallest amount of it, a grain of it, can kill you. And we have seen Mexican drug trafficking organizations put carfentanil into counterfeit pills. So it is extremely dangerous. The best advice I could give you, and I know this is old-fashioned, but I'm just going to say it, don't use drugs. They're very dangerous and they can kill you.
Before we go, what is your biggest challenge to the DEA today?
Fentanyl. We are very concerned about the Mexican drug trafficking organizations manufacturing fentanyl. Right now, it's mostly imported from China, but there is the ability to manufacture it in Mexico. The Mexican drug trafficking organizations have manufacture tons of methamphetamine and have flooded our country with methamphetamine. If they do the same with fentanyl, that's going to be a huge problem.
Yeah, you know why? Because 3 or 4 salt-sized granules of fentanyl can kill a 200-pound man. It takes this much, a little handful, to kill, I don't know, a city at times, right? That's how small it is, and it's easy to smuggle in. I guess that's what you're saying.
That's right.
Okay. I want to say thank you very much to the DEA Acting Administrator, Adam Dillon. Thank you so much. We're going to be right back with none other than, front row right there, Mr. Las Vegas, Mr. Wayne Newton. We'll be right back.
Let's be clear. The homeless crisis is a drug crisis, opioids.
I would say 100% of the people that I have met out here are in some level of addiction.
100%. But in the tiny state of Rhode Island, aggressive steps are being taken, compassionate steps.
We can't just ignore our way out of this. People are dying, and there's something we can do to stop that.
It starts here, behind these walls, at the Rhode Island Department of Corrections.
Because if you wake up in prison, you know you have a problem.
There are 3 opiate blockers that work: methadone, Suboxone, Vivitrol. They are FDA approved. They get people off heroin. They save lives. And every day inside this prison, those medications are doled out to inmates.
Really, this is the perfect setting because there's not as much distraction, actually.
The program is called MAT, Medication-Assisted Treatment. It works like this. The state hired an organization called Kodak. Kodak distributes the medicine inside the walls of the prison, but also outside.
And then once I found opiates, that was the end of it, you know. And then,
Ray Vincent spent the last 3 years behind bars for drug-related crimes.
So you think getting arrested was a good thing for you?
I think it saved my life.
Inside the MAT program, the inmates have counselors. There are one-on-one meetings with recovery coaches and group meetings as well. The key to what Rhode Island is doing is the bridge, the transition from the penitentiary to the streets.
93% of the people who leave here on MAT are following up in the community. That's amazing.
Well, welcome back, everybody. We have here, let's hear it for Mr. Las Vegas, a good friend of mine, Wayne Newton. Wayne. Thank you for joining us. You know my
Thank
story.
you. I'm honored.
About an hour before the show started, a reporter from the New York Times, Katie Rogers, called me and said, went through the rundown, and I mentioned that you were in it, First Lady, and she said, well, why Wayne Newton? And I said, well, Wayne has been in Vegas for 50 years, and he's seen the drug culture change. And by the way, he's Mr. Las Vegas. We got to have Wayne Newton on. Wayne, what have you seen in this city? They call it Sin City. How has it changed over the years?
Well, the Sin City thing truly irritates me tremendously. I must tell you.
Sorry.
I don't mean it against you. That's been a catchphrase that caught on. And when I do interviews, the one thing I say to them is, you refer to my town as Sin City, I'm leaving. Because that's not what we're about. And I think the shooting a year ago proved that. I think that the people saw a community of people, and we can't let that, the drug thing, or anything else define what an incredible group of people live in Las Vegas.
I retract my calling it the Sin City. Let me ask you this, though. What have you seen, though? How is it changing?
It's obviously a city that has had tremendous growth. And with that growth comes a lot of good things, like the Vegas Knights and the football team that's coming here. But with that also, that kind of growth, comes the dark side. And we have seen a tremendous growth of drug problems, of gang problems, of all kinds of robberies and those kind of things that simply come with a city that grows this fast.
What about within your industry? The entertainment industry is historically more involved in drugs. I can think of Prince. I can think of Elvis, Michael Jackson. What's going on in the entertainment industry and drugs?
The truth of the matter is, I'm probably the wrong one to talk to about that, because I came here at the age of 15 years old, and I have no concept of what these drugs mean, other than I've gotten family members that have gotten involved in it, friends of mine that have gotten involved with it. I've gotten the kind of terrible call at night that you got for your son. And I just know that, in my opinion, which I respect, I just believe that there is a larger problem with a lack of education to all of us. We don't understand it. I don't understand it. I didn't recognize it when I saw it in some of my family members. I didn't know what that was. And so many get hooked on drugs in hospitals with painkillers and the rest, and they just plain, when it's time to get out, they're kicked out with no preparation at all for where do I go from here for my pain and the rest of it. And so much of it is that, and I believe that so much of it is so much greater than any of us realize, because we talk about it coming from Mexico, and we talk about it coming from China, and we talk about it coming from other places, when in fact they're just wanting to do us in. And the fact that it hits on people that we love is...
The pressure of being on stage. A lot of people say, a lot of entertainers say, that's what made me turn to drugs or alcohol. Your thoughts?
My thoughts are that's real. I know for myself, when I wake up in the morning, the first thought on my mind is I have to be on stage tonight at 8 o'clock, and I know the amount of energy that's going to take. And so the rest of my day, I plan around what I know I still have left to give at night.
Yeah, how are you managing to do this when so many others have failed at it?
I think it's just that I had so much work to do as a youngster. I started doing 6 shows a night, 6 nights a week. And there is no time to get into anything else, any other kind of life. You eat, you work, you go to bed. Now, the performers who were unfortunate enough to become major stars and feel that pressure of carrying that stardom, I believe, moved to the drugs in order to accomplish that.
Well, we're going to leave it right there. Maybe you could write a book and tell us how you stayed away from all that stuff. I'd love to read it. Mr. Wayne Newton, Mr. Las Vegas, thank you so much. When we come right back, we're going to have David and Jacqueline Siegel, Jerry and Becky Falwell coming right back at you.
This is Michael Manfredi when he came to the Rhode Island Department of Corrections for the final time. He'd done heroin for 35 years. 20 years of his life had been spent locked up.
Would I be where I am today if this program wasn't implemented? No. I wouldn't be here today. Honest to God, I'd be dead.
In tiny Rhode Island, the curse of opioid addiction is being met head-on, here, behind prison walls, and here, out on the streets. The concept is simple, deceptively so. Drugs in prison, the drugs that get people off heroin. And here's the key. The program continues when they get out of prison. This is a Kodak Center. They are sprinkled throughout Providence and Rhode Island. Kodak is the bridge from the inside to the outside.
Once you come into the Department of Corrections and are medicated under methadone or Suboxone or Vivitrol, you become a Kodak patient. You have a patient ID number in our system.
There are 7 Kodak centers throughout the city of Providence. Former inmates show up anytime, any day.
Take-home bottles.
And they get their medication. No questions asked, no red tape. Counseling and the group meetings continue on the outside, too. Michael Manfredi has a job now. He's clean and happy. He's head over heels in love with his granddaughter.
Absolutely. I've never been happier in my life.
One way of measuring success is the death rate for those leaving prison. It's a dangerous time because addicts often get out of jail, use the same amount of drugs they had been using, and overdose. The rate of that happening is way down in Rhode Island.
And what we found was a 65% decrease in mortality for people with a history of incarceration.
65%. The program is compassionate and it's tough, but mostly it's seamless.
All right, welcome back, everybody. I want to introduce first, screen left, stage right, Jacqueline and David Siegel. They are the owners of this beautiful Westgate Resort. Jacqueline and David also lost a child to an opioid overdose. We're going to get to that in a second. Jerry and Becky Falwell, 2 great friends of mine for a very long time. Wonderful people. They run Liberty University, and they were very, very gracious to host us at Liberty once and also be a part of this ongoing process with Sinclair Broadcast. So we thank you guys very much. David, let me turn to you. I don't know if you can do this, and people ask me all the time, do you want to recant the story, how you found out your daughter had passed?
We were in Utah for a wedding. She didn't want to go because she had a boyfriend. It was their 1-month anniversary, and so she stayed home. And while we were out there, we got the phone call that no parent ever wants to receive, that our beautiful 18-year-old daughter had died from a drug overdose. And I couldn't believe it because I didn't even know she was using drugs. I was totally naive about drugs. I didn't know Xanax from Advil. I mean, it was completely a surprise. Had we known she was even using any type of drug, we would have left somebody at home to watch her while we were gone. But it came out of the blue, and unfortunately, we're one of hundreds of thousands of parents that lost children to this horrible epidemic.
Jacqueline, my wife, now this was 4 years ago. I'm a year and a half out, less than a year and a half out, and Adrienne still can't come to these. She wants to be supportive, but it's, you know, if you don't know this, folks, when we roll that package at the beginning of the show, my son's picture's in there. We were in We were in Utah. We were hiking in Utah at that picture, and every time I see it, I don't know how I make it through a show, but she can't. She wanted to be here. Your thoughts? How do you do this? How are you able to be this strong?
You know, it's the most difficult thing I've ever had to deal with in my entire life. In fact, when our daughter passed away, my husband was very worried about me. As the mother, he was worried that I was going to go into a deep depression and crawl under the covers and kind of give up myself. But I realized that it's more important to be strong, not only for my family and our 6 other children, but to be strong and be there to help, to use my strength to help other people, because I can actually be compassionate and know what the loss feels like. Like if someone loses a child, I can honestly say, I know how you feel.
Jerry, you run a university. Wonderful students came out in force that first opioid conference. What are you doing at Liberty to make sure that fewer people are, I guess, the paths cross with your students?
Well, a lot of what we're doing is because of David Siegel. He was a friend of my father's, been a friend of mine for a long time, but he came and spoke at Liberty 3.5 years ago and told about his daughter, Victoria, and urged us to please do something to help. And one of the things he asked us to do was to stock up on, and then it was called naloxone, but it's Narcan. And so we did, and we fortunately have not had to use it yet. But we also implemented a program where students with a problem can self-report without fear of reprisal, without any repercussions at all. And we sponsored, well, that's one of the reasons we sponsored this town hall, was because of David's urging. And so really, behind the scenes, he's been responsible for educating us as a university, and we've convinced other universities to take the same actions we have, and so he's been a big part of it.
Well, thank you both. Becky, one of the things we've learned by doing this town hall basically across the country, blanketing the country, we're leaving here and going to Seattle on Thursday to do another one, is that stigma. The stigma of opioid abuse, overuse, and death is so strong, and so I guess it creates so much fear in people that they don't seek help. Tell us what we can do, what you guys are doing about the stigma of opioids.
It's a part of universities, families. Everybody just needs to know that it's nothing to be embarrassed about. It's a medical condition, and the families and universities and everybody, staff, faculty members, they need to love on our children. The children need to feel love. They don't need to worry about going and telling their parents that they have a problem. Their parents love them and would rather them be here than have a problem and pass away like your children did. I know both of y'all wish your children had reached out to you and let you know they had a problem, and as a parent, as a grandparent, I know that it's got to be just the worst thing. It's unimaginable. It's not a natural thing for your child to pass before you do.
And I've never been a pastor. My father was a pastor, so I feel like I can say this. I think churches and pastors have not properly addressed this issue. I think they're afraid to say things that are controversial, afraid they'll lose members. But I think they need to teach their people to be loving, to be understanding, to be forgiving when they find out about their children's problem. And that's what Christ taught anyway. So I just think it's our churches need to do more, and they're not doing it, in my opinion.
I don't really talk about this a lot. I don't know if I've ever spoken about it in public, but I used to go to church every day. For the better part of a decade, I would go to church every single day during the week, and then on Sunday, 6 days a week. Since this happened, and maybe you guys can, I'm not sure where you are in it, I question my faith now, David. I was a very, very faith-driven human being, and now it's been 1.5 years, and I'll be honest with you guys, I haven't been back yet, because the relationship with whatever that was supposed to be about, I question now. Do you have faith? Do you keep your faith?
Well, it's hard to keep faith when your beautiful 18-year-old daughter dies of a drug overdose. but there's some power that put me in this position, because her legacy is going to be that even though she's not going to be around, she's going to save thousands of lives. She's already has saved thousands of lives as a result of her death. And at my stage in life, this is the last thing I ever thought I'd be doing, but I'm spending 90% of my time now saving lives and getting the word out. I was as ignorant as anybody could be. I had less than zero knowledge about the drug epidemic. I never used drugs. I didn't know anybody that used drugs. I thought drug addicts lived under bridges and slept on park benches. I had no idea that the more affluent you are, the more chance that your child will be using drugs. But we're saving lives. We're talking to everybody we can about Narcan, which is the antidote to a drug overdose. Narcan, or the chemical is naloxone. The trademark is Narcan. It's been out for 48 years and nobody knows about it. This little thing right here in my hand will save a life. Someone could be laying on the ground, turning blue, one breath from death. Put this in their nose, push the plunger, and within 2 to 5 minutes, they'll be sitting up and telling you what they took. Had the first responders that came to my home had this, my daughter would be alive today. But no one knew about it. When I went to Liberty University and spoke 3.5 years ago, I asked everybody, how many of you know what naloxone is? And one hand out of 15,000 students, one hand went up. Today, people know about it. We got almost all the police in Florida carrying it. In Orlando alone, where we come from, they've saved over 1,000 lives in the last year by having Narcan.
Right. Yep. And I think, and I think I said this at Liberty. I think every squad car should have it. Every fire truck should have it. Every school room should have it. Every public place should have it. You go to a movie theater, they should have 10 doses of Narcan for that exact reason. Jackie, I asked David about his faith. Do you have faith? Did you have faith, and do you now?
Well, that's a very difficult question. When your daughter does die, you do question your faith, but I do pray every single night, and I pray that she can hear me, and I do believe that there is a superior source out there, whether you call it God or just whatever you want to call it, because there's been since my daughter passed away, there's been too many coincidences and chance meetings where, whether it's God or a source, putting us together with people that need help or have some commonality, like other people that lost a child and things. So I believe I do believe that there's something out there.
Jerry, Becky, I got about a minute or so. How do you help me?
I can't imagine.
I don't know where to go with it.
I can't imagine anything worse than losing a child. I've got 3 children, 2 grandchildren. But my grandfather, in 1931, he lost an 11-year-old daughter to appendicitis. And he had not planned to have any more kids. He was a successful businessman, but he decided to have one more. And that one more was my father and his twin brother. That's the only reason he had another child. So there is a purpose, even though it's almost impossible to bear. Every death has a purpose, a greater purpose, and you all are making sure that that's true.
Thank you. Becky, final thoughts.
We were speaking about God, and I think that's why we're all here together. I have a strong belief in God, and my faith is strong. And God had us meet you at the Trump Hotel in Washington, D.C. Just in the last year, I walked up to you, and I'd heard about your son and expressed my, condolences and everything. And that's what steamrolled this whole thing. And I think God is blessing you for doing this and going out of your comfort zone, because I know it's very hard on any parent to do it. And for you to have to relive the nightmare over and over again and talk about it, I think God is giving you great strength, and I hope you keep it up. And I know just saving one life is amazing, and you've done that.
I got to leave it right here. We're on a time schedule. I want to thank both of you so much for being here. Liberty, you've been phenomenal to us. Sinclair has been wonderful. David and Jacqueline Siegel.
Let me just say, my wife and I wrote a book about our daughter. It's half of it's her diary.
What's the name of it?
It's called Victoria's
Voice. Everyone, take a look at that book. Before we go, we're going to say thank you to the beautiful Westgate Resort, the Siegels. Thank you so much. News 3, Sinclair Broadcast, the Falwells. Thank you. Remember this. I got a couple of things, final thoughts. Number one, to parents, not my child syndrome is deadly. No one's too smart, too dumb, too rich, too poor, too black, too white. If you have a kid, have a discussion with the kid. And to kids, one pill can kill. We love these kids. Save a life today. Have a discussion. Good night, everybody.